Hello. I wanted to make this special video today because something got me really fired up today. In the past, I have highlighted the fact that there are a lot of not so great carbon projects out there. There are a lot of great ones, but there are a lot of not so great ones. And as a result, it's not a bad idea to turn to independent ratings agencies to say whether or not forest carbon projects are any good. And there are a bunch of those rating agencies out there. You know, there's Silvera. I worked for Pachama. A part of what they do is carbon rating. And then there's one of them called BeZero. Now, I wasn't aware until recently that BeZero actually puts all of its ratings up on the internet. And well, BeZero, I'm glad that you're being transparent in that, at least. And well, you know, I've been looking through their ratings, and I genuinely do not see any relationship between their ratings and the quality of carbon projects. And I'm just absolutely befuddled, where it makes absolutely no sense. So, you know, for background, BeZero is this, you know, this rating organization. They have a quasi-transparent, not so transparent rubric that kind of like overall describes how they do ratings. It doesn't really get into detail. And reading through that rubric, you know, reading through these criteria, there's not much here. I go to download the full document of their criteria. Yeah, there's nothing here. So I don't really know how these ratings come about. Nobody does. None of these review agencies really tell you how they rate their projects. But BeZero, one thing I noticed in all their documentation is that, you know, they're not actually looking at any satellite imagery. So this is immediately a worrisome issue, because if they're just basing their ratings off of the Vera documents that project developers have to submit about their projects, there's going to be sadness. And spoiler alert, there's going to be some sadness here. Let's take a look at some of BeZero's ratings. So they're ranked from their highest score to their lowest score here. And they've rated over 100 projects so far. So yeah, they're busy beavers, I guess. You know, going through them, I recognize a lot of names. I recognize their highest ranked project, Rio Bravo. I think it was pretty good. However, if I scroll down to the fourth highest ranked project on their platform, Langua, this really strikes me, because this project, it is the project that I use by default to show people how badly baselines can be manipulated. It is my default project for one of the worst avoided deforestation projects that I have ever seen. And, you know, one of the reasons for their ranking evidently is a conservative baseline. Well, I gotta disagree with you guys, BeZero, and here's what I'm gonna walk through how Langua cheated their baseline so badly that they're probably receiving 8 times as many credits that they should. So let's pull up this image. This is an image that I've splashed up on half of my videos in the background. Well, let's actually go through what's happening here. This is the Langua project area in blue. Now, the Langua project area takes place in an area that's already conserved. These are game management areas that are already being conserved by the Zambian government. But, you know, this is not necessarily bad. You know, if areas that are already conserved are being enrolled for forest carbon projects, then what we need is basically evidence that these areas were the conservation wasn't holding up, that this project was under some sort of duress. Well, if you look at the deforestation rate inside of these conserved areas, you can see that it's pretty low. I mean, it's still there, so the project can still take place, but it's pretty low relative to the regional average. So the conservation mechanism that's in place already in Langua that predates the project, it's obviously having some sort of effect. Okay, so we've got a project taking place on already conserved land. Obviously that conservation's having some sort of effect. How are we going to draw a baseline? Well, if we were going to pick a reference region to look at as an analog for what was likely to happen inside the project, we would probably pick a reference region inside these conserved areas, wouldn't we? Yeah, that would make a lot of sense. But they didn't do that. They selected a reference region just outside the conservation easement. In fact, just outside the conservation easement and drawn almost exactly to avoid any overlap with any conserved areas. All right. How does their reference region actually compare to the project area? Now, the two are fairly close geographically, but the project area is taking place inside of an arid mountain range. There's absolutely no impetus for population to go into these areas and convert this to pasture land or to crops. The reference region, on the other hand, is taking place on highly desirable land. If you compare the gross primary productivity, if you compare disturbance rates, if you compare, mean annual temperature and precipitation, the reference region comes out far ahead of the project region. And so what we've got here is we've got people basically saying, all right, we've got this project that's already in protected land. Let's look over there and at these really juicy land that's been being deforested for the last 30 years and say, well, that's what's going to happen here. It's just nonsense. And so, as a result, if you just do some basic numbers with Global Forest Watch data, you can come to the conclusion that this project is, potentially receiving up to 8 times as much credits as they should. So, a hit and a miss, BeZero. This is one of the shittiest baselines that I have ever come across. And one more note about the baseline of Longua. It uses one of these sigmoidal curves. And what I really hate about this is there's an option in the Vera literature to either use a sigmoidal curve or a linear curve. People in areas where the forest is not being deforested very quickly, it's not very desirable land, tend to use sigmoidal curves because guess what? It always ends at 100%. It always results in 100% of the area being deforested, even if we're talking about arid mountains that are completely inaccessible like Longua. So, there's just a myriad of problems with Longua, but here's the problem with the baseline. But I'm not done with you, BeZero, because look, I've gone through a lot of your ratings, and they're objectively awful. They make no sense. It's like there's a monkey throwing darts at a dartboard. So let me go find another one that I've already pulled up data for here. Neat Tapio, AA plus rating from BeZero. That's right up there with like the top rated projects, right? Sounds like it's going to be a good project, huh? Let's go take a look at what's happening inside of Neat Tapio. Neat Tapio is a project that started less than 2 years ago, in 2020. Since that time, all this yellow area is what's been deforested inside this project to date. The project has experienced mass deforestation. And what's actually happened that's even worse than that is that bad guys have actually carved out roads in the north and in the west of the project. And they've actually started like penetrating deep into the project area with these roads so that they can access all that much more timber. Besides the actual deforestation, there's evidence that there's serious forest degradation taking place inside this project that's not even being shown in this Global Forest Watch data. So let's take a look at the actual satellite imagery, Let's go head on over to Neat. Now, I don't have access to commercial satellite imagery anymore, but this is a satellite image from before the project started right here, and this is a satellite image from after the project started. And one thing you can notice right off the bat, this is already 2-year-old imagery. There's a brand new road that extends right down the middle of the project, extends into the project, and there's subtle degradation starting to occur all inside the project. And I can tell you, if you were to look at 2022 imagery, you'd see more roads here on the west coast as well. So Neat Tapio, not off to a good start. BeZero gives it an AA plus rating. All right, let's keep it rolling. Let's see what else we can find. If we scroll down to Rio Bravo, this is one of the better projects that I've ever come across. Complete deforestation on all sides. Really seems like a strong project to me. Yeah. All right, let's keep going, because I've got a bunch of these projects lined up, right? Here's a gem. Blue Source Middlebury College. Half this project takes place on a recreational ski slope, and another good portion of it takes place on the college campus, like in an urban environment. They call for clear cuts in all of these areas. Pretty suspicious to me, but look, I don't have data pulled up for Middlebury College, so we'll move on. Here's one. All right, AA plus rating. Pretty good for Weyerhaeuser, Uruguay. This is a reforestation project where they're planting eucalyptus trees. Weyerhaeuser is a massive multinational timber company that plants eucalyptus trees all over the place. And these trees are for pulp, so they're basically planting these trees, cutting them down after 10 to 15 years, and replanting them. So this is a highly industrial project. The only justification for these credits at all hinges on the idea that these trees wouldn't have been planted. Well, let's head on over to Uruguay here. This is actually for Guanare. Yeah, well, they've rated Guanare the same. Let's take a look at this project. These eucalyptus plantations that are extremely industrial in nature, non-native, short rotation eucalyptus plantations with herbicide and, you know, the whole wazoo, they're taking place on a landscape that is covered in eucalyptus plantations. So you're telling me that a timber company that does nothing but plant eucalyptus trees for pulp really relied on these credits in order to plant these trees? These credits are worthless. And how do I know that they're worthless? I know that these credits are just a cherry on top for what Weyerhaeuser was already doing, because they sell these credits for nothing. You know, it takes about $30 a ton to actually plant trees for carbon. And it's really difficult to do because nobody wants to pay $30 a ton. Why doesn't anyone want to pay $30 a ton? It's because Weyerhaeuser, who's already doing this, who's already planting these trees, and this is just a cherry on top of their normal operations, has been selling these credits for nothing, for bottom dollar. Again, BeZero, thank you very much for giving it your second highest rating score. I want to end by talking about this project, the Brazil nut concessions in Peru. Again, AA+ rating score from BeZero. Fantastic, right? Again, this is one of those projects that I've come across that I'm just flabbergasted by. Brazil nuts is an avoided deforestation project taking place in Peru, and there's been intense deforestation inside this project. You know, this is problematic, right? Like, Vera should be notified. We've got a reversal on our hands. Let me tell you about the solution that these guys came up with. Rather than verifying the entire project whenever they want credits, they only verify the bits of the project that weren't deforested. There are actually bits of this project that were started inside the project, weren't verified 1 year because there was deforestation, were verified the next, weren't verified the next, and then were verified the final time. So these guys are literally only counting forest conservation when it happens. They don't count deforestation when they don't want to. And this is cheating, obviously, BeZero, in case you guys haven't noticed. And guess what? This isn't even from the remote sensing imagery. This is just by reading the documentation. So, I mean, again, I'm left believing that potentially these credits are worthless. I don't know what they're really worth, because one strategy that they've used is actually just enroll more land. You know, a lot of these areas, maybe they were deforested. Let's not count them anymore. Let's just enroll the place next door. Absolutely ridiculous behavior from this project, but more ridiculously, behavior from BeZero. So where am I getting here? Obviously, I have a lot of hatred. One of the reasons that I'm extremely frustrated is because BeZero, by having these absolutely randomized reviews on their website, they're leaving room for interpretation. They're leaving room for debate. Now, I can demonstrate with a satellite image that there's no more forest in a lot of these projects, right? But, you know, if an uninformed customer comes and, like, you know, sees what I'm saying and then sees what BeZero is saying, then they're left, you know, feeling as if there's some sort of nebulous debate. It's no different than Fox News, you know, raising questions about climate change. Scientists don't really agree whether or not climate change is a thing. Scientists don't really agree whether or not Brazil nuts has been successful. No, Brazil nuts has not been a successful project. Neat Tapio is on the border of completely failing. And many of these other projects that are rated by BeZero are absolutely worthless. But here's the thing. I'm not just a negative Nancy. I want to point out that a lot of the projects that have been rated by BeZero, you know, they're pretty good. And in fact, some of BeZero's like least well-ranked projects, you know, like the Valparaiso project, I thought they were great. And so this is why it feels like BeZero is throwing a dart at a dartboard here, because I don't think there's any logic behind the ratings at all. Now, I mean, why is this happening? What's my advice for BeZero? First, I would maybe go out and hire more remote sensing scientists, more forest scientists, more real experts who have been in this space a long time. A sustainability expert is not the same as like a real forest mensurationist. They are two different, you know, areas of expertise. Second, BeZero, you got to look at the satellite imagery, because like half of the points that I've made here are either coming from Global Forest Watch data or just Google Earth. And so if it takes me 30 seconds to see that there's eucalyptus plantations all around the eucalyptus plantations that these guys planted, then it should take you even less, BeZero. All right, so that's my teardown of this particular ratings agency. You know, I've worked for ratings agencies. I know that you can do this the right way. And I know BeZero is not doing it the right way. I would just not trust any of their ratings. So there you go. And full disclosure, I'm considering doing something about carbon ratings myself. Somehow people need to know which projects are good and bad. You know, I've already obviously reviewed a bunch of projects on my YouTube channel. I'd like to formalize that in some way. So, you know, obviously it pisses me off to no end when I see BeZero doing it with absolutely no rationale whatsoever. So there we go.